All right, folks, we're going to get started.
SLC.
We've got the thumbs up from Sam. Thank you, Sam, for getting us up and live on the interwebs. Excellent. So I'd like to call this.
Are we going into closed session tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's litigation.
Right, but he wants to make a motion, but it's not written here.
Yeah.
Normally it's written. Right?
Yeah. I'll let us know which ones we need.
Okay, so you can just jot that down.
Bring the mic towards you.
All right, we're going to get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting on January 17th, 2023. Thank you all for being here. We are all present except for Board Member Bade, who is out of the country visiting family. We will need to enter into a closed session for the purposes of discussing character, professional competence, and or the physical, mental health, and well-being of an individual, pending an imminent litigation, and as well as collective bargaining,
and land transaction,
and the discussion of a land transaction for real estate or property.
Are you looking?
Open to a motion, yes.
I'll make the motion that we move to closed session on January 17th, 2023 at 5:04 p.m. for the purpose of discussing pending or imminent litigation, collective bargaining, and the purchase, sale, or lease of real property.
And character.
Oh, and character, and professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual.
Thank you,
I'll
Brian.
second it.
Thanks, Christy. All right, is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote, starting with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, that motion carries. We will definitely be coming back out when we're done with the closed session. We will definitely be coming back out when we're done with the closed session. Thanks, everybody.
As a purely operational matter, should I ask?
Yeah.
So I thought I would just give a heads up, I'm sorry, to Bridget and to Richard,
Okay,
that
and
we have
say,
graduation that day, depending on, I don't always go to everyone, depending on the piling is going to go during the day. But if you're in
can we divide and conquer,
Yeah.
or?
Figure it out.
Just a reminder to speak into the microphone.
You got it.
Recording can pick you up.
Just wait. I'm assuming there's no thumbs up yet. Okay. All right, we'd like to welcome everybody back to the public meeting. Thank you for allowing us the time that we needed to discuss a number of items in our closed session. Thank you for being here tonight. I want to acknowledge our SLEA representatives, James Tobler, our president, and Mike Harmon, our vice president. Also want to acknowledge all of our classified groups that are watching, and along with our SLASA organization that's probably watching too, and recognize their leadership as well. Next, we will have our Pledge of Allegiance, and Dr. Hall, our Executive Director for Teaching and Learning, has agreed to lead us in that tonight. Thank you.
Stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, for leading us in the pledge. Next on our agenda is our consent agenda, and I'm open to a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
do that.
Thank you.
I move that we accept the consent agenda, which consists of the purchasing and accounting reports and the student overnight travel.
Excellent. Thank you, Board Member Swett. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. Any discussion to the motion tonight? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and start with a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Sika.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Thank you. That agenda carries, or consent agenda carries. Up next, we have our discussion agenda, and the first thing on the list is an open meetings review from our Executive Director of Policy and Legal Services, Christina Kindle.
Oh, my gosh.
The boot. Careful.
Hi. I know everyone's been eagerly anticipating this presentation as much as I have been. So I'm here to do the annual training for the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. As you all know, the reason that this statute was passed was to ensure that all governmental entities are who are charged with conducting the people's business take their actions openly and hold their deliberations openly. Sam, it's not clicking. Yeah, I swear to God, I can push the forward button. Like, this isn't rocket scientist, but apparently it is. But what I can say is, without transparency in your deliberations, in your actions, it creates a deep sense of mistrust and a lack of security in how you made those decisions and the decisions that you've arrived at. So part of the Open and Public Meetings Act defines what a meeting is. And a meeting, for purposes of this board, would be if a quorum was present, so that's over 4 board members, and if you were meeting to either discuss or receive public comment about something that's within the scope of your authority and purview. It also indicates what a meeting is not. So a meeting is not a chance social meeting. It's also not a meeting where 4 of you might be present, but you're only talking about operational or administrative matters that would not come before the board for a vote. So for example, if 4 of you were having computer issues and problems and you met with Sam to have those issues addressed or resolved, that would not be a meeting. If you were in HR to discuss your health benefits, that would also not be a meeting. So those are kind of examples. You want me to click through again, Sam? In terms of what a meeting is or what a meeting is not. Oops, here I am.
Did you quote the Dalai Lama?
I did quote the Dalai Lama. Great. So the basic rule is that you're supposed to make the public aware, and part of that is giving them at least 24 hours advance notice of your meeting, and what that advance notice would include would be the agenda, the date, time, and location. Typically your date, time, and location are all included on your agenda. Those need to be posted on the public notice website, as well as the district office and the website, and notification needs to be given to the media. Typically, April Johnson does that, so we're very appreciative of that. We also need to post your board-approved annual meeting schedule. So the agenda requirements. So you need to, on your agenda, list the topics you will be discussing with reasonable specificity so that the public can understand what that is. Each of the topics should be listed separately, and potential closed session items should be identified. The board president does have the discretion if during public comment the public raises an issue. The board president can decide that you as a board can talk about that, but you would not be able to take any particular votes on that. So when you're having electronic communications, when do they amount to a meeting? It's that dreaded reply all. So the courts have said in court cases that they've identified this idea of a rolling quorum, whereas that maybe you have this communication with 2 people, but the intent is, and then those 2 people are going to go talk to 2 more people and 2 more people and so on, right? So the idea really would be to thwart the transparency of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So courts have indicated that they are well aware that boards can do that. So this is supposed to be a table. I don't know where it is. It looks like this. But it would require a magnifying glass regardless. Hey, Sam, why isn't that pulling up? Is it?
Oh,
One by one.
One by one. So, oh, I have to click through them all? Are you frickin' kidding me? They're not kidding me. Okay. So, oh, I'm going back. Okay. So red means stop, green means go, yellow means proceed with caution. Really, the two questions to ask yourself are what's being discussed and whether it's 3 or more board members or 3 or less board members. So the idea here is if it's 3 members discussing, but you're going to add in more people, you need to be cautious about what your topics are. If you have 4 members and it's just administrative or like operational matters, you're fine to discuss those. But anything that's coming before the board, that's a hard red, which would be stop. So these are the questions that I just sort of went over. Figure out what you're talking about, whether you're going to be taking a vote on it, how many board members are involved, whether that's a quorum. Are you trying to circumvent the spirit of the law? And always remember that your emails and text messages can be subject to disclosure under GRAMA. And I'm sure all the board members are aware that we do get frequent GRAMA requests for your text and email messages, so just be aware of that. So be cautious that it's most likely a meeting if you have a majority of the board members participating in a conference call, if you're doing one of those serial or rolling quorums, and if you're text messaging or using email to give approval or discourage a matter that's likely to come before the board. Avoid using reply all or copying and forwarding to other board members. That gives the idea that you're trying to circumvent the Open and Public Meetings Act. And I'm not trying to discourage sharing information. It's really the idea of deliberating and making those decisions. So emergency meetings, these are something that the board can call when you don't have the ability to give 24-hour notice. The law recognizes that, but there must be an emergency or urgent matter that you need to discuss. You have to give as much notice as practicable. The majority of the board members have to approve calling an emergency meeting, and you have to attempt to notify all members of the board.
Christina?
Yes.
So I know it might sound like a silly question,
Uh-huh.
but if we are in a position where we can't make decisions outside of the public, in the event of an emergency meeting, how would we go about having all of the board members approve that?
Well, I mean, you'd have to call them and ask.
Okay.
And then we would have to post that on our
Okay,
notice.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Sure. So, electronic meetings. You do have the ability to do an electronic meeting. It's part of our, the board's policies. It needed to be in policy. You have adopted in your board policy the ability to hold an electronic meeting. Part of the electronic meeting requirements would be that you provide an anchor location so that the public could come and participate in the open portion of those meetings. If you could not have an anchor location, it would have to be because there are health and safety concerns that would exist for the public if they were to show up at an anchor location. This was specifically put in place recently in response to the COVID pandemic. The board president would have to make a decision and outline his decision as well as all the facts and bases for that decision. You would have to post that in your notice as to why you were not providing an anchor location, and that decision would only be valid for 30 days. So every month you would have to make a decision if that instance arose that you weren't going to have an anchor location. So just to be clear, there is nothing in the law that allows people to come and be disruptive of your meetings. The public has a right to attend. They do not have a right to be disruptive. So the law allows you to remove people who have created a significant disruption in your meetings. In terms of a record of public meetings, your public meetings must be recorded. Audio is sufficient. An audio recording must be available within 3 days of your meeting. You must have a written record, which is what the minutes are of your meetings. Your minutes must include the date, place, time, the members present, the substance of what was discussed, a record of the vote, and you must indicate by individual board member how each board would provide a link to the time and place in either the video or audio recording where that matter was discussed. So that's something if you chose in the future to do, just a link to that exact time, you could refrain from having that in your minutes. Retention of minutes. Board approved minutes are a permanent record. That's why it's so important when they appear on your consent agenda that they accurately reflect what occurred in the board meeting, because they will be kept permanently. Pending minutes need to be made available to the public within 30 days after the meeting. Just know that those unapproved or pending minutes are grammable, but they just need to be clearly identified as pending or unapproved or awaiting approval. So texting during meetings. Texting with other board members during board meetings does not conform with the Act's requirements for participation by board members to be recorded in public open deliberations. So if you make this face, I am going to know you were all being naughty and doing something you should not be doing, and the public will as well. It's a hard no on texting other board members about items that are being discussed during board meeting, or emailing your colleagues, your other board members during board members about things that you're discussing. But just to be clear, there's nothing in the Open and Public Meetings Act that restricts you from texting or emailing other board members outside of a board meeting. We're not trying to say that you can't ask, can't have social discussions. There's nothing about that. So, closed meetings. As we've done even today, calling a closed meeting requires a quorum to be present. You have to start in an open meeting. 2/3 of the members present need to vote to go into closed meeting, and it must be for a proper purpose. The reason for the closed meeting has to be recorded in the minutes, as well as the location. So there are lots of closed meeting topics that are authorized under the statute. Here is a list of some of them. Discussing an individual's character, competence, physical or mental health. And again, that talks about an individual, so it's not necessarily an employee. Pending or reasonably imminent litigation, collective bargaining, property transactions, deployment of security personnel, devices or systems, or investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct. Some of the things that would be improper that you might think about would be if for any reason a board member resigned from the board and you had to fill that vacancy, you are not able to discuss their character and competence in a closed session. And you are not allowed to take a vote in a closed session. That has changed recently. The only vote that would be allowed would be if a board member in the middle of closed session made a motion to end closed session. That is now permissible, and that vote could be taken, and if it was approved, you would immediately end closed session, and that vote would need to be recorded on your minutes. Closed session records, with the exception of discussions of an individual's character and competence and the deployment of security personnel, devices, and systems, everything else needs to be recorded. Written minutes can be taken of those other two items. It must be a complete and unedited recording from the commencement to the adjournment, and you have to include the date and time and the members present and any other individuals present, their names. And again, these would be protected records under GRAMA that would only be released pursuant to a court order. So, violations of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So any individual who believes they've been denied a right because the board would have acted in violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act can bring litigation in 3rd District Court. If it was found that you had violated the Open and Public Meetings Act, any action you took in violation would be voided. And you can cure any potential violations by revisiting the matter in a public meeting and taking public action at a subsequent meeting. The penalties for violating the Open and Public Meetings Act or abating or advising people to violate it would be a Class B misdemeanor, which would be a fine of up to $2,500 and a jail term not to exceed 6 months. Any questions? Ending on a high note there.
I'd say. I think you need another Willy Wonka slide there. But,
Jillian put that up. She was like, I thought you deleted it, so not you. And I was like,
no, in all seriousness, thank you.
Of course.
Christina, for presenting this to us. I know it's a refresher for some of us, and it's an add-on to all of us who've been participating in USBA conferences and then the new board member orientations in Provo before the beginning of the year. And I would open it up to the board if they have any specific questions about this presentation and OPMA.
Okay, well, if you ever do have any questions, the superintendent is clearly an expert on it, and I could also answer any questions you may have, as well as your board counsel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to our second item of the discussion agenda, we have our board member committee assignments, and I believe Sam's going to post that, maybe? I don't know if okay, thank you. And I do have a few hard copies. I don't think I have enough for everybody. Would anybody like a hard copy? Okay. All right, perfect. There you go, Bryce. So the purpose of this, again, there are some positions here on this document that we'll be looking at shortly publicly that were decided at USBA conference. For example, our Region 5 representative, congratulations to Brian. I know he brought that up in his board report. Our USBA delegate assembly, and then of course our alternates to the delegate assembly. Everything else that you see on this list, on the board committees, are more or less just suggestions or are carryovers from the previous board and corresponding precinct number for these various positions of the policy subcommittee and then of course the finance committee. Human sexuality, I have been on that the last couple of years, and so on. But I do know that there's some discussion that needs to take place relative to finalizing this document tonight, and I would open it up to the board to bring up any suggestions, concerns that they might have with these assignments. And somebody needs to push the button. Thank you. So I'd open it up to the board. Board Member Jensen.
Nate, has Mohammed been made aware of this so that when we're discussing this, we know that he's accepted responsibility for those areas where you've assigned him? It seems like we need to know that before we can proceed further.
Yes, for sure. Not this specifically, but I know that I have talked with him before he went out of the country, and I think he's perfectly comfortable moving off of the finance committee into policy. So that is, or did I get that right? Other way around, scratch that, reverse it, another Willy Wonka comment. But he is comfortable moving off of, or remaining on finance committee. So, thank you for that.
I have a suggestion.
Board Member Anderson.
So there's a second spot open on the RDA committee, and I would suggest that either myself or Board Vice President Williams take the second spot. If people are amenable to that, that's great. I can give background about why I'm making that request.
Okay.
If necessary.
That'd be great if you give the background.
So a lot of us know that in 2021, the board passed B3, which was in response to some legislative changes around Community Reinvestment Acts, also called CRAs, which locally are called RDAs. And Board Member Sweat is still on that committee, and the law made a change for future RDAs where the full board is tasked with most of those responsibilities. And the prior committee I thought might not need to exist, but it does look like it needs to exist to comply with projects we've engaged in prior to 2016 that aren't completed. And it's my understanding from Business Administrator Kearsley that there are two of those projects, Block 70 and also the Central Business District, and those appear to be in my precinct as well as yours, Board President Salazar and Vice President Williams. So because we'll need to engage in some things about that, I think it makes sense to have people most impacted by those CRAs join the committee and also make use of that second spot while that's still a thing.
Okay. Thank you for that context. Board Member Sweat.
So I think there's been some confusion about the RDA committee because it's not actually a committee. So what actually needs to, what my suggestion is going to be is that maybe give it a little historical perspective. So the city council initiated a quarterly meeting with the school district a number of years ago, over 15 years ago. And they have an RDA chair that is a member of the city council. And they thought it would be wise for the district to have a similar representative that would attend those quarterly meetings with the city council. So the RDA representative, it's not a committee. And so if you're going to create an RDA committee, that's not what I've been on. What I have been is just a representative that goes to the meetings on a quarterly basis with the leadership and the counterpart from the city, okay? And there was only one time in the past 20 years where I've actually attended a meeting, or Doug Nelson, who was previous to me, attended a meeting that the city council actually held in regards to an RDA committee. So that was clear back when Stan Penfold, that was the last one that I was a part of. So really what this area should be is the city council committee. I mean, it should be the president, vice president, and their counterpart, the RDA person. So it's just an RDA representative. It's not a committee. And those three people would attend that quarterly meeting with the city council counterparts. In no way, shape, or form have I ever made a decision or represented the board in any way on RDAs. And so it's a little misrepresented the way that it is listed there, because I've never done that before. And Alan knows that because Alan's been there. We usually have, I can't remember Danny's last name. What's Danny's last name?
Danny Walls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he would come and walk us through any RDA projects. The board as a whole is the one who decides about RDAs, whether or not we're going to approve or not. So I would say that whole title needs to be struck, and that we put back in there that it's a quarterly meeting with the city council that includes the president, vice president, and then an RDA representative.
Okay.
That's it. And so it's, and we can do that, however you guys want to do that. But I wouldn't even say once a year or when needed. That's never happened. I mean, Alan, I would say that we've never had that. So it's just matching the city council's leadership.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that suggestion, and that's something that I'd be willing to support alongside the approval of the board, of course. It's our document and our responsibilities. But thank you for that suggestion, and I would be comfortable moving forward with that.
So the only other thing that I would suggest is we tried really hard to make sure that we had good representation from whoever was going to sit on that committee.
Okay.
And so you want to look at your quadrants. So you've got somebody from Bryce's quadrant, which is, our northwest quadrant. You have central, which would be you. Mm-hmm. And so the only pieces that you're missing are the two other quadrants. Although, taking to Ashley's point, that there are some issues, around RDAs, but it wouldn't necessarily be discussed at that meeting unless we wanted to bring something about the RDA to the agenda.
Okay. Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt if anyone else had something to add. I would just say that it does seem, I also thought what you thought, Christy, about the structure, and that it was not necessarily a committee and it wasn't really needed anymore because of the law. It does seem like digging into that legal change and also the state statute that decides this, which is Title 17C, if anyone wants to look it up. It does seem like there are some committee responsibilities, and it's not totally clear to me because a lot of this is, heady and unclear. I think it's worth still adding a second person, whether that's an alternate or whatever it is, while maybe we get some more information about, what changes were made, what does Title 17C really ask of us, and then those two people could relanguage this. But it still seems prudent to me to add a second person to be part of that discussion.
Well, we'd have to be careful relative to having 3 or more board members, even in a discussion like that, based on what we just learned.
Well, I just mean there's
Christina
a second
Kendall.
spot.
Oh, I get that.
Like just the blank spot.
Yes.
I'm saying let's not leave tonight with a blank spot.
Understood.
When there's some discussion to be had about
Right,
that.
and I think what the suggestion on the table right now is for discussion is that we would change that RDA committee to some kind of a title that encompasses, board leadership and city council leadership, along with the RDA respective leadership as well, so that we're more consistent with that quarterly meeting that's taken place, and it did fall by the wayside during the pandemic. I know that for a fact, but it would still cover, and it was my understanding, to your point, Christy, and suggestion that it would still cover the responsibilities of what that specific area of the board assignments has been in the past. Is that what you were thinking, Christy?
Yeah, I think that specific line needs to be renamed.
Yeah. Martin?
It feels as though we're talking about two different things with using the same name. Each RDA by any other name has a tech committee, taxing entity committee, and the Board of Education has a seat on each of those tech committees. I don't know how often they meet to get the up. I don't know that. Sounds like not very often.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
There and so our in my mind and what I'm familiar with is that the board when an RDA is presented and whoever the fellow is that you named him that comes makes a presentation to the board evaluates that. Is this something that we want to invest in, or is this something where we're lining somebody? You have that discussion and then you vote as a board, we're going to support this or we're not going to support this. I'm familiar with then a board member being the liaison to the tech, being the board's representative on the tech committee to communicate that and also to be updated on any of the updates as the projects never develops the wrong word. Projects never flow the way they were designed to flow in the first place. And so that the tech committee meets with some frequency or lack of frequency. So it seems to me that there's certainly room for identifying somebody as the board's tech committee representative. We call it that, taxing entity committee. But then Krista, you've described, and Nate, you have just as well. And Jennifer, that's a meeting that I guess representatives of the board used to have with representatives of the city council, including mayor and other.
Mayor.
Not the mayor, so just city council. Is the superintendent involved?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Okay,
the
superintendent
and business administrator.
Business administrator, 3 board
council.
members, and members of the city council.
And the mayor has sent representatives before.
The mayor, and maybe that's a possibility. Yeah, I mean.
I think Weston
yes, they can
attended a couple.
send.
I'd be pleased to work with Jennifer and with the mayor on kickstarting those meetings. Again, the title for those meetings is probably not RDA committee.
Right.
And I think that was the point you're making, Christy. But I do think there may be a need for having somebody designated from the board as the tech representative.
What if,
So can we,
Go ahead,
I think that, I've never heard of that before, of a tech representative. We've never had that request, right, Alan? So we need to look into that because that's not something that the board has ever been charged with. You know, usually because we're our own municipality, we've just had them come and make a presentation and then conversations happen from that point. But yeah, I mean, if there's some sort of a committee that we're by law supposed to be a part of, that has not been an invitation that's been extended to our board.
I'd like to make a suggestion. What if we included Christie's suggestion of having the city council and board leadership RDA title to include board leadership, the RDA, I would say maybe let's make it a designee, leave the RDA line and maybe RDA designee and tech representative plus an alternate. I think that would cover kind of all the bases that we're kind of talking about tonight, and adding the new committee responsibility that Martin and Jennifer Newell from the mayor's office are going to get kickstarted again with the city council, but also maintain some semblance of having RDA representation where and when it's needed, and an alternate for if that person isn't available. Board Member Anderson.
Again, sorry, this is
No.
like the third time. I would say, I think that sounds great. I would suggest that because we're looking into, that statutory obligation and how it's all worked out, to me, because of, it's my understanding based on reading the tech statute that representative in a tech body can sort of decide whether to extend RDAs. So to me, it still makes sense to have a second person whose precinct is in one of the ongoing areas, which would be Block 70 or Central Business District, to still serve as a second person. I don't see any downside to having a second person versus an alternate.
Okay.
But that's just because I know the RDA development in my area has really impacted it. So I care about that, but I would think anyone who's in a similar boat would be a valuable second ad. But otherwise, that sounds great to me.
Does the board feel like adding, instead of, I think maintaining the RDA designee, and then maybe a part of that same title having the RDA tech person representative, or does that muddy the waters more so? Christy, I'm looking at you.
So this is a working draft, right?
Yes, it is.
And so I would just say that I don't want to vote on anything tonight. I think we need to find out more information before we create our own committee.
Okay.
That might not, I mean, I'm really interested in what Ashley's saying because I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And so I would like us to research that, find out what the obligation is, if we need to be
Okay.
a part of that, because this is all new to me. But I'm fine with that, if that's what you want to do. I just don't want us voting on it tonight.
Okay.
Because I think that, we don't really want to create something that's not,
Yeah.
that we don't know for sure,
Okay.
that we need.
I think that makes sense to me. And then, and Superintendent, do you feel like you have enough direction to
Yeah, I've
to
not
research that? And-
I've not worked. I don't have experience in a district where it's only serving one city. And so that's intriguing to me. Board Member Anderson raises the issue of they can be extended, and who makes that decision? Well, we ought to be involved in that decision, and so who's the person that does that? So if I'll work with Alan on chasing down what a tech committee looks like within a city, and that when the school district is the only there's only one school district in that city, and see what that looks like in our situation. Sounds like I'm confident the city's been working with us in good faith, but I'm really intrigued that there hasn't been a tech committee meeting on any of those that we've been participating in for all these years. So that we'll chase that down. I think that's very fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that portion of the discussion. I would like to get to other titles of these board committees while we're here. So let's just kind of go through these one by one, and I think there was a suggestion from another board member about a subcommittee to the policy committee relative to the board handbook. And I don't know, Board Member Sweat, if you wanted
Sure.
to address that.
I'd be happy to. So in regards to so maybe before we talk about the handbook, President Salazar, I think what would be important where we have 2 new board members, and I still consider Bryce new, with all of this too, that to talk about what the responsibilities are for those 2 subcommittees. I think that would be great, because I know in the board policy subcommittee, one of the things that Ms. Kendall has really tried to do is set an agenda so everybody knows, what policies are coming up, that if you have anything that you want to talk about or relate to the subcommittee about a policy that's coming up. But also I think that she's really set great boundaries and also a great process that the subcommittee doesn't actually decide what policies we're going to be talking about. That's all driven by the board.
Right.
And so I just think that having that discussion, as I'm going off the policy committee, and you've got Bryce, who will be, the one who will be the wise old owl, on there with who's on it with you, Brian and Jenny. That it was a great committee, and I really appreciate Ms. Kendall's process that she has set forward. So going on to the finance committee, it would be really nice then when we get to that point for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that what my suggestion was is that we make an ad hoc committee for the handbook. The policy committee, keeping them really focused on the policies of the district, and then have an ad hoc committee, for the handbook. And what I was thinking is if you had 3 people that were on it, old eyes, mine, some medium eyes, which might be considered Bryce's, or Jenny's, and then new eyes, which would be Ashley or Brian, to look at maybe putting the committee together that way. And then we can use that opportunity for our MBC, for our Master Board Certification, and maybe take 20 to 30 minutes each board meeting to talk about those sections, that we would bring forward with Ms. Kendall's help, and because she knows the handbook really well, that that we would be able to use that in our professional development. And so that was my suggestion, is that we would look at possibly doing some kind of an ad hoc committee to the board handbook.
I like that suggestion as well, and I know we've talked in the previous meeting about how important being trained on our board handbook is, especially with the recommendations coming out of the legislative audit. So that is certainly something I would support, and Christy, you sound like you might be the first volunteer. Okay.
Yes. I
And-
would be happy to be on it, and whoever else you
Yeah.
want to, whoever else would be interested.
And as far as the medium-wise eyes, Jenny or Bryce, would you, either of you be interested in participating in that ad hoc subcommittee if we move forward with that?
Yes.
Jenny, you want to do that? Okay. And then I guess Brian or Ashley,
Your new eyes.
your new eyes.
I'm happy to do it, but would you like to be a part of that?
If Brian wants to do it, that's great.
Okay. All right, so we.
We'll let Miss Kendall sort of set a schedule for us, because she has nothing better to do.
Thank you. And so moving along to our charter school boards, mostly we just kind of pick this based off of interest and location of where board members are relative to where these schools are in their precincts. And so Bryce, being that the Slicksy High School is in your precinct, it seems like that's something that you're interested in. Similarly with SPA and board member Sweat. So I think we could probably leave these the same. Relative to the Finance Committee, I'd love to give a background of that. Of course, we review annual audits. We had Squire here last meeting, and they gave a great report on what we've been dealing with there. Of course, we provide recommendations to the board about the content of financial information, legal services, financial services, in an advisory committee role. Some of the other pieces that I've experienced on the finance subcommittee is, either engaging the board in choosing an RFP committee, or the finance committee actually handling the RFP process when we go out for a vendor. And then, of course, just making sure that our budget is in a good place relative to presenting it to the board. And then, of course, any other financial matters that come to the finance committee that ultimately get reported out to the board. Is there anything that I'm missing that you would want to add to that responsibility for that committee, Alan?
It kind of goes along the lines of audit reports. In the legislative audit, it talks about the internal audit function. As we look on how we might make that a more robust function, those internal audit reports would be reported directly to the board finance committee.
Is the Finance Committee also the Procurement Committee, or is that changed? I can't remember.
Alan?
I mean, we don't usually do procurement,
Right.
but
They've been
once in a while.
they've acted the procurement when we did legal counsel.
That's right.
Kind of, yeah.
I think that was
That's the only time as
the
you
only-
say it.
Yeah, because we
Right.
don't do the auditor, right? I mean,
Yeah,
do we
because
do that?
finance, we kind of do the auditor, and we kind of share the results with the board finance committee and then roll the results.
Bond counsel?
Bond counsel, we didn't have the, because you weren't on that, right?
No.
Nope. Again, that's.
Oh, I ended up being on the bond council, wasn't I? I can't remember.
It's been a while.
Why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, when those come up, we'll look at them again. That's right.
Okay. So I think the makeup of both the policy and the finance committees and the ad hoc committee look good. Charter schools, human sexuality and education. Basically, we need two.
Two? For human sexuality?
Yeah. And I know I've served in that role for a couple of years and would like to step down with some new responsibilities that I have. So I would open that up to any volunteers from the board that would be open to that.
I'd be happy to.
I think your social work background, okay, so Bryce and I will maintain that.
I would only ask that you just, will you do a report
Report?
back to us?
Yep.
I think that would be really helpful to know what's happening on the foundation. And
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you, Christy. The Salt Lake County Recreation Advisory Board. Christy, I know you have some experience with this board and maybe not as much as you would have thought, but do you have any suggestions for us, or Martin, as you've researched
I think
this?
that, so myself and a former board member have been the only ones that have been on the advisory committee. It's changed when it changes mayors, that advisory committee. There was a time when it was just the school districts, a representative from the school districts. Ms. Martin would remember that. Now it's a much larger group, of people across Salt Lake County. I'm losing the sense of why we're on it. I'm not really sure. There was a time when we were influential around ZAP. When they were rebuilding Northwest, the community center, we had a little bit, of influence, there. But outside of our, our contract with the swimming pools, right, Alan? That's about the only interaction that we have with the county. I would say that if we're going to continue, so it is an appointment, we would just forward a name to the mayor and to the rec board, to the director of recreation, is that we would try and decide what is our purpose there. If Salt Lake District has something that they want to really partner with the county, then that should be our purpose on that board. There's been two things that have tried to push forward that hasn't really gone anywhere. The first one is an internship. I think that our kids would really benefit from summer jobs, and that's what they're always looking for, summer help. And also that the going into the recreation field is waning, as a college degree. And I think that finding some pathways for our kids through internships would be really incredible. The other piece is the adaptive sports. It's unfortunate that, they actually have a really amazing adaptive director and have done great things at their county facilities. But I think that trying to partner with them with using our facilities, that looking for a way to partner on the adaptive end with our kids with disabilities, and looking at playground equipment and sensory, I would invite all of you to go up to Hillside to see that amazing adaptive playground that is up there at the side on the north side of Hillside. And so that would probably be another area where I would say, how can we better partner with the county with funds or grants of looking for adaptive things, adaptive playgrounds and sports, especially for our kids with disabilities, because there isn't any kind of coordination between that. And usually what we hear is that they want to use our building, a court or something like that, instead of there really being a true partnership, with how we can work with the county around healthy lifestyles for our kids. So whoever we put forward, I would just say, let's come up with some ideas that we'd like to put forward. I would say I would invite Dr. Bates to talk with the director of the county rec and put that forward, that's something that we'd really like to see some sort of a partnership going forward, especially with those two areas. So.
Thank you.
But otherwise, it's been, it's a really easy board. They meet on Wednesdays, usually at noon, for a couple of hours.
Okay. And it's also my understanding, Superintendent and Christy, that this is by law that we do have to put a name forward, correct?
Yes. And so you put a name forward, and then you get a nice little letter from the mayor. And
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have interest in maintaining that spot?
I don't.
Okay.
Wednesdays are really difficult. I know. I don't.
I just had to ask.
I've been on it for a really long time, and I think that I've just sort of lost that vision of trying to figure out what that is. And I think new blood and somebody new sitting on that board would be really great, with a new vision from our board and direction from our superintendent, and renewing a relationship with the director would be really great. So. Nope, but thank you.
Okay. Well, is there any interest? I do have a slight interest in it, but I know I'm quite busy. So if other folks from the board would be interested in that opportunity, speak now. Let us know what you're thinking. Crickets. Okay. Brian, do you have any interest in serving in that capacity?
I will serve on it if we need to. I guess I've been thinking being on the board of USBA is.
That is a big
taking
deal.
some of my time too,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, well, I'd be happy to.
If you need me to.
There was at one time that Mohammed was kind of interested. It might be something you have a conversation
Yeah,
with him.
how about we pencil Mohammed or I into that spot?
See, when
Mohammed's
you're
going to have
not
a lot of
here-
work when he gets back. All right, and then the next on the list here is our Traffic Safety and Transportation Committee. We've had Jenny and Mohammed serving in that role previously, and it looks like we would need a third person to fill that out. So Jenny, are you still interested in participating in that?
Let me see how many I'm on.
That's a fair thing.
Yeah,
I can, do you want me to, Jenny, if you're hesitant, I can step in.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you want to stay on? If you want to stay on, you stay on.
no, you could take it.
Okay. We'll pencil you in there, and
Well, we need a third person anyway.
yeah, we do. And I know Mohammed would
Yeah.
still probably be interested in that. I know he's quite passionate about this element of our board assignments and work.
So do you actually meet monthly? No.
Where's Kelly? Or Paul, do you have a?
Paul, do you have an idea?
No, and I actually think, well, I do have an idea, excuse me. I think it's actually Ken now that's been running it, and I think it's been it's every other month is my understanding.
Is it a Zoom meeting?
I don't know currently if this is Zoom, but it's a very important committee, it's a very effective committee.
I think it's important with the number of traffic incidents we've had to have also maybe someone in leadership represent on that committee, because it seems like there's more urgent issues than previous. Not, I mean, if that doesn't work
Oh, no,
out.
I think it's fine.
That's just my opinion.
If you keep Jenny and Mohammed and then one of you, I mean, I don't need to be
Yeah.
on it. If you or
Um,
Bryce want to step in.
Well, Bryce, I think just expressed interest, so I'm going to pencil him in as number 3. And then Christy, I think we leave it with you and Mohammed and Bryce, if you're okay with that, unless Jenny really wants to take it on again.
It doesn't matter.
Well, I think.
If you want it, you can have it.
Well, so I think that Ashley's point is really important, that we need to look at where are some of our hot spots in our city. You know, where are we having some problems? And I think that maybe we need to think about that
Okay.
and be strategic, you know, about, and I agree, I think somebody from leadership should be there, and then who the other 2 people are should also be representative of some of those hot spots that we have. And maybe we could talk with Paul and with Ken and find out, you know, who might be the best fit for that and if they
I
can do it.
like that. So let's leave Bryce on there as the board leadership rep, and then Brian, what do you have?
I think this is really critical.
It is.
I mean, we had a fatality, you know, in the Bonneville Elementary School neighborhood. And right now, we've got a representative from the mayor's office, and the Bonneville community, they had a meeting a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago or something like that. And the mayor's office had the head of transportation there, and I think that it's important that we have a committee that is coordinating all of this so that we're covering, I mean, there are hot spots, but I also want it to be that we're working with the appropriate agencies to address these issues.
I agree with that for sure. So I think the direction that I'm hearing is let's leave Bryce on there for sure. And Paul and Superintendent Bates, if you could report back to us in the next draft some suggestions from specific precinct board members, then we can discuss that at our next meeting when this appears next. Wellness Committee, Jenny and the student board member. How has this been going, number one, and do we need to make some changes to that every 18 months? There's a big gap in there. Maybe we need to re-examine that. And Lydia, I don't know if you've ever participated in that meeting, so.
I haven't.
Okay. Should we leave that the same? And
Sure.
okay, that works for us. All right. Well, I have a new draft to work with the superintendent on. Bryce and I will make sure to do that. I would anticipate that this appears next on our next action agenda.
Okay.
So we can hear reports from what is being suggested. Alan? What do you got?
So generally, the next Finance Committee meeting and Policy Subcommittee meeting happens in January. Would you like us to move forward with the proposed committees or push those meetings back?
I think finance and policy are in good shape, and I say we move forward with that. If the board's comfortable with that, and then we can approve the other positions comprehensively in our next meeting.
And then I'll ask the Finance Committee, because Mohammed will still be out of town through February. Do we want to move the Finance Committee back or just hold it?
I'd say move forward, and I'm happy to attend while in his absence. Okay. All right. Well, we have some work to do to clean this up and share it back out.
So what day typically is it? I know policies, what day that is, but I don't know finances.
Next Monday, but the Monday after.
Is it the Monday after yours?
Yeah.
They're on the same, but
They're on the
If you
same.
can read it.
for those numbers on policy subcommittee, my assistant Jillian Norton will be reaching out to you to find a convenient time and day. But it's right now scheduled for the 24th, but if that doesn't work, we can adjust for sure.
Will you send us a calendar invite?
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Alan, for bringing that to our attention. And thank you, board, for having the robust conversation about the board member committee assignments, because they are very critical and important to our operation as a board. Moving to our third agenda item on the discussion agenda, board and board leadership evaluation. And I would turn it over to the requester, board member Jensen, to introduce the topic and the discussion.
When I introduced that, I was thinking how we have an annual evaluation of our business administrator. We have evaluations of our superintendent. I think that it's valuable to have an annual evaluation of our board leadership and then also of our board. So as I looked at that, when you look at the board policy or the Board of Education handbook, there are some guidelines in there where it talks about, and I mean, this is just giving us kind of some background, and of course, you know, everyone interject, or if you don't think that this is necessary, but to me, when you look at board policy B1, it talks about responsibilities and ethics. And to me, it outlines in there what our responsibilities are and then how we should ethically behave. So to me, an evaluation could include some of those guidelines that are in that. It's also referenced in the handbook. There's also some references as well. Without you know, taking a lot of time, I could refer you to, let's see, Statement of Ethics for the Salt Lake City Board of Education. It gives in there an outline of how you are going to perform in your office, that you're going to treat the other board members with dignity, you're going to avoid conflicts of interest, all of those things. And it seems to me that if we have, you're going to endeavor to attend your board meetings. And I recognize that we all have situations where we need to be excused, but that we are making an effort to be to the board meetings, and that we are making an effort to attend the training sessions that are provided to us through USBA, or, I mean, we have training meeting this evening, the public's meeting training, and that we're attentive to that, and that we're taking those things seriously. You're also, I mean, we're supposed to be guardians of the funds of the students of Salt Lake City, so that when you're looking at those financial reports, you really are looking at them. I mean, I think that it's easy to see, okay, you know, there's that. But for me, when I look through those, I think on some of them, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I understand that the superintendent, he's in charge, and he's the one that's working with the rest of the executive committee and his employees. But I also want it to be that we have an accounting, that those funds are being, and so for me, if they're going to the work of giving me an accounting as a board member, I have a responsibility to look at that and to make sure that I agree that it was, and not just me, but that the board agrees that we have been effectively using the funds of the children. So those are just some of my outline.
No, I appreciate that, Brian.
There's also, when you look, it talks about board leadership and what their responsibilities are. And the board leadership, they're supposed to create the agenda. They're supposed to have the agenda created in a certain amount of time. I mean, those would be the sorts of things that could be in an evaluation, because, well, we just heard from our legal counsel that when we're looking at the agenda, we need to have the things on there so that we have a basis for those minutes, that it's reflecting everything that we are covering in our meetings. So to me, those would be some of the things that we would put in an evaluation for the president and the vice president of the board.
I appreciate that, Brian. And certainly something I'm in full support of. And I think you're right that we have a good template of suggested evaluation, criteria. One of the other things that I've been thinking about and have talked with the superintendent and Bryce about is connecting with Richard Stoll and USBA, because it's my understanding, based on individual conversations with you and other board members, that they have some good tools that we could use to plug these criteria into, so that we're doing this in an effective way. And I know superintendent's reached out to Richard, and hopefully Richard can come prepared at our next meeting, and maybe we can readdress this again, if it makes sense for the board to continue this conversation, which I think it needs to continue. But do know that, I believe as the board president that it's very serious what you're bringing up, and it's very important and crucial for the operation of this board, and of course, how that trickles down into the operations of managing both the superintendent and the business administrator. So it's well received, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And Board Member Sweat, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, since I was the seconder,
Yes.
Of it, I think that this past conference, we received the school board professional governance standards.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that this will be incorporated into our handbook. I think that it has excellent points, that we can be looking at. We got out of the habit of evaluating, the board. And I think that I was really pleased, to see that Brian has made this suggestion, because USBA does have a really great tool, and we can custom do it, to some of the things that we'd like to, incorporate into it.
Okay.
I think that there are two things that I walked away with this past weekend when we were when was past weekend?
Yeah.
Where does time go? First was, this ethical leadership and the professional, the school board professional governance standards and the importance, and then also a list of the duties of the school board, are also on it. But the second thing is I wish that all of us could have attended Tammy Pfeiffer's workshop on dignity. I think that when, words matter, And I think that as a board, for us to not only engage in an evaluation of how we're doing our work, setting goals, looking at, those ethical standards, it provides us the guardrails that we provide to the superintendent and to the and to the business administrator, but also to our public, to know how we're going to conduct our business. So I think that the other piece for me is that, as we leave this board and other people come on, that if there's some things that are already in place, that continuity is so important, that when somebody says, what do you do on the Board of Education, or why do you want to run for this position, you can easily tell them what the duties are, what the expectations are, because I think that there's so many people that don't understand, what school board members do at their district level. So I was really pleased to second this. I think it would be great to work with Richard, but also for us to engage as a board, to see what that looks like, and that could also be a part of our master board certification.
Okay. Thank you, Christy. Is there any other thoughts of the discussion?
Just on that, after our meeting last week, where we talked about inviting Richard to come talk with us about superintendent search protocols, he and I have been in communication. He'll be coming to the study session on the 21st of February, and I've asked him today. I've not heard back, but I can't imagine him being reluctant to do that. Asked him if he would bring evaluation tools so he could spend some time talking about that with us as well. So February 21st is when Richard would come.
Does that work for the board as far as our next discussion about this topic? And of course, I'm still open for more discussion tonight. I'm not trying to end the discussion.
I think that would be valuable
Yes,
to have him.
I agree.
I mean, we've talked about those tools.
I would love to figure out if we could ever have Tammy come. I know she's so busy, but she lives right here in the city. I just thought that, even professional development on a district-wide, to talk about that dignity scale and to take the dignity pledge, and there's such a difference between what dignity means and respect. They're two different things, and I was so inspired by that, and I thought we should definitely take up that, that run that she asked us to do.
Thank you. Jenny or Ashley, do you have, Jenny and Ashley, have anything to add to the discussion? Brian, anything else?
I've had individuals contact me that, I guess when they saw that this was something that I was bringing, this seems to be something that people desire. And there's another program out there, it's the Golden Rule Project. And and these are things that are used here in our community. And it seems to me that it would be positive to reflect, the dignity, allegiance, and look at some of these other.
I've always thought that our board could use our own MTSS program. If we're asking teachers and schools and kids to do that, then we should be doing that as well. I appreciate that, Brian. Lydia, anything from the student board member perspective and your role so far, and how you might want to engage in this type of evaluation as well?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, well, I think this has been a good discussion, and I think we got some good direction as board leadership and superintendent to make sure we have a robust conversation prepared when Richard joins us on the 21st. So thank you for bringing this to us, Brian and Christy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please.
Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. Up next on the agenda is our stakeholder survey. I'd like to invite Dr. Hall, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. Martin, do you want to introduce the
Yeah, this
topic?
also grows out of our conversation last week about surveying the community, really the community as a whole. There'd be an opportunity for specific stakeholder groups in reviewing, as we discussed this the other day, in reviewing applications, but to the community as a whole, I'd suggested we had some tools and some expertise in-house that we could employ pretty quickly. And so Dr. Hall, please share with us what, I think there's a couple of things in front of each of us.
Yes, so we have some print copies, both of my PowerPoint, which is not exciting, and then also of the survey draft, which we'll walk through and kind of show you what it looks like and see what changes, augmentations, anything else that you would like to make. If we could accomplish that tonight, then I'll share with you a timeline that would be very expedient in getting you back some feedback for the superintendent search. So I'm going to see if this works. Look at that. All right. As the superintendent said, the purpose of doing this would really be for you. This is a survey for you and the work that you'll be doing in selecting a superintendent to lead the Salt Lake City School District, which we are very grateful for you that you are doing that work, let me just say. So in our department, we've developed a series of questions that is based on research of effective leadership and effective superintendents, and also echoes many of the superintendent searches that have been done in districts that are using this same data. So we're hoping that this will be useful in both receiving input from stakeholders about the qualifications and experience they value in a superintendent, and also in helping you draft both an announcement or questions or any other selection criteria that you would need. And one of the pieces that we heard from you that would be very important is knowing who that information would come from and how you might be able to collect that. So as you know from previous surveys that we've run through the district, we have a very fine-tuned system of internal stakeholder deployment and reporting. And we can do that by our employee groups, our certified, we can break that into administrators and teachers, and our classified, and then also all of our parents with a listed email. And when I say all of our parents, that is any parent who's listed. So if I am a parent with two sets of parents, or a student with two sets of parents, that email would go to all of the parents listed in PowerSchool. If they're not listed, we'll have an option on the next slide that I'll talk about. And we do that by connecting to their addresses in our PowerSchool Business Plus system. And so each one of those people get an individualized link that would be emailed to them to respond to the survey. We would also be able to send this survey to all of our students. Generally, we do grades 4 through 12, simply because of content and reading. Not that there's anything that we need to look at in the content, but, reading level. And we can do that by pushing a link out in their student folder on their school desktop. So when they log into the computer, that link is there in the folder. Or, especially in secondary, we often will use a QR code that we can post up and say, are you interested in providing feedback or completing the survey about the superintendent? Here's the QR code to scan so that that can be done. Then the reporting can come for those very same groups so that you'd be able to see, in fact, and this I would take guidance from you, we can break that up again into all of these levels. You could look at elementary to secondary students. Any of those groups could be broken up for reporting. Externally, this is something that we have not done very often, but we would be able to do in this case in a slightly different way. We would be able to reach out to all of our community stakeholders using an open link on social media. I've worked with Ms. Chatwin, our Executive Director of Government and Community Relations. Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay. And about how we could push that out on all of our social media forums so that it goes to all of the members of our community. And we would look at that with an IP address review. Now, what that means is this would allow us to ensure that we aren't spammed by any particular constituent. So we could look at this and say, here's an IP address. Maybe this address responded to the survey 2 or 3 times. Maybe that's a family with one computer and 2 or 3 people have taken it on the computer. But if 100 or 500 people have responded from that IP address, then we're going to look at that and say, this looks like either somebody who is spamming us or pushing an agenda, and we would pull that back and count that as one. So we wouldn't be able to say, Bryce Williams, you've responded 700 times to this, but we would be able to say this IP address has clearly exceeded what we would think of as a one-to-one correlation. That's the advantage we have with our internal system for our employees, parents, and students, that we're able to say we have a one-to-one response. But with this way, we feel like we would be able to be relatively certain that we could make sure that you were receiving an accurate, within reason, accurate count of survey to people being surveyed. So those invitations could go out on all of the social media platforms. We could think about if you were interested in some other ways of posting them around schools for community members, or when parents came into the office, we could have those QR codes there as well. We'd also like to specifically email invitations with that open link to people like our city administrators, the Salt Lake Chambers that we have, our elected officials, the mayor, councilmen, legislatures, and our Salt Lake Education Foundation board and supporters. So they would be able to see that same link, but we have their email addresses. So please.
Dr. Hall, relative to the chambers, would that also include our identity-based chambers in the community, like
Yes.
the Pacific
Mhm.
Islander? And
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. All of those chambers. And so we would be, again, I would be working with Ms. Chatwin to make sure that we were able to push those out to all of those so that they would be able to then, because it's an open link, forward that to all of their membership, and they could do this. So this survey link, unlike our internal survey links, which can't be forwarded because it's tied to me or to my student, this open link could be forwarded to other people to make sure that we had coverage.
Okay.
In this case, we really think that more coverage is better as opposed to other surveys we've done where we've really wanted one-to-one control over making sure that we have accurate.
We'd like 200,133 responses.
That is correct. I should have put that number up there. Very good. So I'd like so that is who we would put the survey out to and how we would put it out. I'd like to talk a little bit about what that survey might look like. I'm going to do a brief overview, and then when I show it to you, I want you to know that I've got my copy and my pen so that I can take changes for you there. We'd start with generally a small piece of descriptive text. This would be used to push out on social media, so we have a reason why people would be interested in doing that. We would include this in an email so that when people like our chambermen or chamber people or legislators forward this, that information would go with it. It would be something, short like this.
Dr. Hall, we have a
Yes.
question from
Oh,
Board
yes,
Member
I'm
Anderson.
so sorry.
I'll just try to ask as we go along. Is that
Yes,
the
of
easiest
course.
way to do this? So in the back, there's the literature review about
Uh-huh.
like what is the superintendent. Is there some way in the descriptive text to just like in really plain language clarify what a superintendent does? Or would someone have to go to the end of the survey to see that literature review?
And actually, that literature review is just for you. So
Okay.
I was
just-
not,
it makes
yes,
sense.
no.
There's, people filling it out who will fill it out, and what are they filling it, to what end are they filling it out?
Yep.
I think like along the same lines, when I've talked to like high school students, not even fourth graders, a lot of them don't know what the Board of Education is, and a lot of them don't know what a superintendent is. And so I think in order for the survey to be valuable for them, and for you guys to get valuable data, I think it would be beneficial for those to be defined.
Very good.
Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you.
I just wonder if, you've said the position begins on July 1st. Is there somewhere, and I was looking through, are we giving them a sense that we need to hear back by a certain amount of time? I think we need to, this feedback needs to come quickly.
Absolutely. And thank you. It's not on this piece of descriptive text, but we do have that
Okay.
in the piece I'm going to show you when we flip to the survey.
Okay.
And the timeline, if appropriate, would be that we would need to have this information back by January 31st.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a very, depending on the timeline that you want to hold for receiving this information, it would be a fairly tight turnaround. So we would make sure to advertise that, and I'll talk in a minute about how we'll send out reminders for people to make sure that they're knowing when that date is if they haven't filled out their survey yet. We would ask a couple of different kinds of questions. And again, because turnaround time is paramount, we really want a lot of quantitative questions as opposed to questions that we're going to have open-ended and would be reviewed and need to be coded. So we would do questions where we ask people to rank things that are the most important, to rate things that they agree with or don't agree with, and then we would be able to turn those around very quickly into some descriptive statistics by total and group. So for instance, we could say overall, the top 3 things that our constituents think are the most important for a superintendent to have experienced are this, this, and this. When you look at it, administrators favor this, students favor this, community members favor this. So we could break that up. Then we would have one open response question that I'll show you. And that one we would code. And in coding that, somebody reads through, and we have some software that helps us. The software will read through and pick out major items or trends. So if a lot of people are saying really needs to like chocolate ice cream, that would come up as something that we could focus on. And you would, maybe want to ask, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream? So we'd be able to code that, and we would give that to you with 37% of people felt that was very, very important. And here are a couple of representative comments around that. Okay. In addition to that, for our open community responses, because we won't know who's answering, we have some questions that we could ask with your direction that would help us to be able to break that group down. We could ask if they are, the superintendent has talked about, we have a responsibility to everybody who's connected to our district and who's not, that 131. If it is a taxpayer only without a student to the district, that would we'd be able to ask them if that was represented them. If they were a parent or guardian, and if a parent or guardian were to submit on both surveys, again, I think our grain size is large enough, that would be fine. We would never turn someone away from putting their input into a survey that is open. Whether they were a chamber member, a city official, an elected official, from SLEF, or a board member, a supporter, or a student, and then they could optionally respond with an age, a zip code, and a precinct or their elected board member. I'd like to show you what some of those questions would look like, so I'm going to go ahead and ask Sam if we could flip over into Qualtrics. So this is what it would look like, and what you see here is what it would look like on the left if you were taking it on a computer, and on the right if you were taking it on a phone. And so I know that our time is valuable and it grows late, but I would really like to know if I have your direction to go forward with this. So as we look at this, if there are things that you would like me to add, like I'll be adding into this page right here, a sentence about the important responsibilities of a superintendent and your role as the elected officials representing our students and community and school district, your role in selecting that person. Here, Board Member Jensen, is where I also have that the survey will take 5 to 10 minutes and that it will be open to January 31st. I will carry that information into the email so that it is more predominant when people are looking at it, because you're very right. Sometimes you look at an email and you say, oh, I'll get to that in just a hot minute. And then it's, Valentine's Day, and here you are, and you've missed your opportunity to complete the survey. So once they have seen this opening page, then it will go through, and our first question asks about the values and priorities for Salt Lake City School District, and it's a ranking question to rank important qualities. So what people will do with this one is, you can see Mr. Quantz is demonstrating that it's a drag and drop. We have 7 different statements there that you can take a look at. Creating, well, now they're out of order if you look up there or on your paper, but on your paper, it's creating efficient systems to achieve the district's strategic plan for student achievement, measurably improving school or system performance for all students, understanding a diverse educational environment, building public confidence, understanding, and trust in the system, recruiting and leading staff to effectively serve all students, creating a positive change, a positive climate, not climate change, a positive climate for all employees, and securing and managing financial, staffing, or other resources. And so they could drag and drop that into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we would be able to give those orders back to you. Please.
I think just like the same kind of concern that I said earlier, I think if I'm like a 4th grade student, I might not know what the district's strategic plan is. So I almost wonder, I still think it's really important to get feedback from elementary and middle school students, but I almost wonder if we could have I don't know how much more complicated it'd be to have a separate survey with maybe like simpler questions or questions that like might make more sense to younger students who may not understand what the district strategic plan is or what any of these things really mean to them.
That's always the issue, right? Do we go down to 4th grade? Do we cut it off at secondary? Do we put it out there just for, students who want to take that? Do we make it a simpler survey? it would be possible for us to target a survey with simpler language to certain grades. It would not be possible for us to target both. So I couldn't say to a fourth grader, you can choose this one or this one. I would have to send one or the other to them. So if that's something that you would like to do, we could possibly simplify that. I would not have time to bring that back to you if we were to stay on a timeline that would match what the superintendent talked about at our last meeting. But we could look into that and put something out in a more simple way, or we could, as we have done with previous surveys, kind of left it there for students who are interested in taking that.
Dr. Hall, could we have, I know this might be impossible to, but just for question's sake, could we have surveys that target specific age demographics within elementary and junior high and high school,
Yes.
and have 3 different outcomes based on that survey response pool for each grade level, or is that just too much?
I think you could probably get at what you're looking at in 2.
Okay.
In 2 kind of, I hate to say this is the adult survey and a not adult survey, but we could look at something that would be student-friendly. And we could target that and send that out. I'm watching my teams to make sure that our assessment team is going to agree with me on this. But yes, the answer is yes. So we could do that and target it by grade level.
Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I think that this process is going to be really long. So like initial stakeholder survey, I think this is a good start. And getting more specific feedback from students, I think, would be important later. The one thing I noticed that's related to what Lydia brought up is when it talks about student achievement, I wonder if student achievement means the same thing to a broad range of stakeholders compared to a superintendent candidate who reads student achievement and thinks like your Lexile score at a certain grade level. You know what I mean? I don't know many parents who think about that. So achievement is the one part of the language where I think simplifying it in general is beneficial for everyone, because I don't think that's a universal term. Like, what do we mean when we say that?
How would the board like me to define that? I mean, learning?
I think so.
Okay. Board Member Sweat?
So I'm trying to, I'm going to lean a little heavy on to Ashley and to Jenny right now, because if it were me and I got a survey, I would sit down with my kids and we would talk about it together, versus me wanting a survey to go directly to them that was specific language, specific questions in an elementary setting. Secondary, I might, again, I would want that to be interactive. And so I'm going to really lean towards the 2 of you to say, and Lydia's brought up this idea, to look at surveying, and the language that we're using towards, our elementary school up, specific to students. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that would look like. That as a parent, would you want that survey to come to your house that was directly for them and they sit down and do it? Or is it something that we're going to encourage a family to do together with their guardian or their parent or grandparent? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that right now, of what we really are trying to get at here.
I'd also like to interject, and thank you for that comment, Board Member Sweat. I'm thinking of it in the context of a teacher in an elementary school, and there have been surveys that we have done to elementary schools, but then what you're doing is the teacher is, when I say administering the survey, what I mean is the teacher is walking the children through it, helping them to understand, because they are going to have questions on, I don't understand what this is, or what are they asking me, Mr. Jensen, or so I don't know if that's, and again, I will lean to those that have parents, but my one hesitation about parents is there are some parents that are really busy and they don't have the opportunity to sit down, even though they'd like to, with their children. So is this something that as a board we want to think, are we willing to ask the teachers to take 15 minutes or whatever it is to do something like this in a classroom setting?
Board Member Jensen, I appreciate that, and I know that many teachers did an excellent job when we've deployed before, using this as an object lesson to talk about teaching civic responsibility,
Exactly.
providing those kinds of experiences for students to participate.
Superintendent, you look like you
No,
had an entry there.
Yeah, I'm, if that were to be the case, I'd certainly want it to be voluntary. I'm real reluctant to tell all of the teachers and our elementary teachers that they need to spend.
Absolutely.
And it's not going to be 15 minutes, because it'd be 15 minutes if they did it straight.
You're exactly
And,
right.
yeah, so that's,
Yeah.
today, let's not have,
It's one more
let's,
thing.
let's not have whatever it is that I'd planned on doing. Let's do the survey the district sent and is making us. The other side of the coin is that we send it to 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders.
Right.
And not to elementary students. That's another option. And avoid that problem. So we'd miss the input from elementary students, middle school students, but we'd capture it. Frankly, I'm thinking about the Brexit vote. Remember, they opened it to 16 and 17-year-olds because they were engaged enough to realize that it was an issue and we're about to inherit this. And that's, I'm not suggesting that we cut elementary and middle kids out of it, but if that's the concern, I'm concerned about class time.
Right.
And
I
imposing
understand
that.
that and asking teachers to do.
That's, and then the concern, then I'm also then concerned if we're not going to do it in class, then I'm concerned about parent time. And then I'm,
So
sorry.
may I suggest that we look at the rest of the questions, and then we come back to the question of, would it be most appropriate for students in grades 7 or 9 through 12? Are there questions that would be appropriate, or if this is something that we should think about just in terms of students are still custodial of their parent, and their parent will respond to the survey? So if that's okay.
Okay with that,
So.
Rebecca? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hall.
So thinking about this one, other than, I'm going to look at the wording under the strategic plan question around student achievement. Any other comments on that question? I picked up the clicker, but it's not the clicker. Okay. Our next question looks at the importance of experience that a superintendent candidate would have. And this asks about some of the things, and as Board Member Anderson has already pointed out, there is a literature review at the end that talks about where some of these things have been noted in the literature as things that effective superintendents can do and also have bearing and context in our current reality. So increasing student achievement, this is a most important to least important ranking.
Sam?
Oh, sorry, Sam, next question.
Oh, who's got the?
Next slide.
Next
Oops.
slide.
Next slide, next, what's it? Nope, not slide.
Oh, it was the next slide, not the next PowerPoint, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the next set of questions.
There we go.
Uh-oh.
We'll continue on working with, this might be the only time I've had more access than Sam. Please take a picture of that real quick. I'm going to read it while that pulls up. But it's rate the importance of the following experiences of a superintendent candidate in increasing student achievement, creating safe and welcoming schools, increasing the graduation rate, leading a successful bond campaign for construction, allocating and using funding appropriately, working with public and private businesses or corporations. That would include, for instance, our city and other government entities, building a collaborative working relationship with the school board. This one continues on in typical Tiffany style. Developing positive relationships with employee organizations, implementing school safety procedures with positive collaboration with law enforcement, and guiding change such as school closures. So this is how important is it for a superintendent to have had experience in these areas.
So, Dr. Hall, I think this is a really great list. There's a couple of things that I feel like I would add. I think that the legislative piece is really important. I think that we need to see how important that is to our community, that our superintendent has, some sort of interaction with our legislature.
Participating in the legislative process.
Yeah, legislative process, building relationships with our city, something like that, however you want to
just that one.
Thank you. I can add that one easily.
And then, let's see, you did say private, let's see, public, private businesses and corporations, but I feel like what's missing is the city part that's specific to our city, you know, city mayor. Would you think that that would be, I don't know, I didn't feel like that was really in here.
So public corporations would probably include the city. We could call that out more specifically.
Maybe call that out a little bit more specifically in that area. That's it. Thanks.
You bet.
I think, Dr. Hall, to that point too, we have a lot of partnerships, whether it's, you know, the University of Utah or
Community partnerships.
Community partnerships, yeah.
But some of those community partnerships have a really heavy influence in training or providing professional development to teachers, and I'm wondering if there's an element of that. I know we used to have a relationship with UEPC, for example, and entities like that within the school district might be.
Yeah, working with community partners to enhance education.
There.
Working
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
something
Good.
along those.
Yep.
Okay, so I have that I'm adding participating in the state legislative process, working with local governments, and that for us, that would be local city governments. I don't even know, I don't have to say local because there's only one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Working with our city government and working with community partners to enhance education. Great, very good, thank you. All right, the next question is to rate the importance of the following previous experiences of a superintendent candidate. A little bit more specifically, if they have had, if they have been or are currently a superintendent or a central district office administrator, a principal or assistant principal, or a classroom teacher with 5 or more years of experience.
So for me personally, you guys helped me a little bit, but that introductory reads funny to me. And I'm not sure if we would, I don't want to wordsmith it, but it just reads funny to me.
And on the previous one, it's the same
It's a, yeah.
wording.
How about if we just take out following, rate the importance of these experiences for a superintendent candidate.
Tiffany, what's hitting me now that I didn't see previously, and let me see if I'm saying what you guys are. I'm looking at the one on slide 5. That almost feels like a ranking. And the way the question's asked doesn't help me. Is it important to you that that the candidate has had experience in this, has had experience in that, has had experience in the other?
There we go.
Not which is most important.
Right. Let's do.
And I see that in both of those questions.
Both
Is
of
that
those.
capturing? Okay, that's what Lydia's saying too. We can remove
Okay,
that.
that's great. Is it important that the candidate has had
Experience as.
experience
boom. And then
as?
instead of most, it's very or not at all.
Right.
Got it.
And then, and again, just help me with my ignorance, but I feel like it has to be a specific call out on the doctorate.
Oh, please hold. Please
Okay,
hold.
all right,
Please come,
okay, all right, thank you.
You are not the first person to say that
Okay,
to me.
because I was like, I don't think I just want it to say doctorate.
Okay. Is there anything else on
Okay,
this
on
one?
that first
Well,
page,
I'll tell you, we
okay.
can always turn the page backwards. So the next one said, the superintendent candidates should, and then
Oh,
have
right.
earned a doctorate, currently work or have worked in the district, currently reside or have resided in Utah, have non-traditional experience in corporate, legal, community, or military settings. And this is an agree, neutral, or disagree, which is another way that we could set up the question on the previous page as well. Rather than maybe, very important or not at all, to I agree, I'm neutral, or I disagree.
Right.
For both of these.
I would switch both of the previous ones to agree, neutral, disagree, just because I feel like from like my perspective as a student filling out surveys, I'm like, what does 4 versus 3 versus 2 mean? Like it's hard to like pin those down when filling out a survey, which I think can make sometimes people just not finish the survey, and also like is maybe not as valuable when analyzing the data because people have different scales of like importance.
Sure.
That's a great point. Yeah. Okay, so here, about the doctorate piece.
Yes.
Can it be specific? I mean, because doctorate can, I mean, do we want it to be specific? about the type of doctorate we want them to have. Give me an example of something that's outside of the education.
English literature.
Juris Doctor.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Medical doctor.
Right. And so I don't necessarily want to say that, have you earned a doctorate? Well, I have a PhD, I'm a doctor. For me, what's important, and this is something I would want to know
Doctorate
from the
in
rest of the
educational
board,
field.
that it's in the education field.
Yeah.
There are a lot of pediatricians who will be very sad tonight.
I know, right?
They work with kids.
Yes,
And
they
on
do.
the second one on that page, let's just call out Salt Lake City School District. Oh, no, well, yeah, is it important that they've worked in Salt Lake City School District, and then the next one worked in Utah?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Very good.
That's it.
All right, and so I am going to change both of those to.
And it makes, I think it makes good
Agree.
sense.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The next one is another ranking, so people can drag and drop. The next two questions are based on this. What is the most significant student challenge the district faces? So 1 is the most significant, 6 is least significant, drag and drop to indicate your rankings. Providing access and opportunity for all students to achieve, closing student achievement gaps, ensuring that students with disabilities have appropriate supports and services, meeting the needs of high-performing students, hiring and retaining effective, experienced educators, and increasing communication with families.
I think achievement gaps is a term of art here, and that makes sense, but on the top one, I would change it to learn.
Okay?
Oh,
Just personal preference, so people could disagree.
Thank you. That would also match what we just did on the
That's
first one
right.
as well. Okay?
so I'm going to say this based on the next page, because you've got hiring and retaining effective, experienced educators. Is that encompassing the para-educators? Is that, because that's high on everyone's mind. Should we call that out specifically?
I went back and forth with that, and since you've brought it up, then I would say, we could say effective and experienced educators, and then parentheses, administrators, teachers, and paraprofessionals.
That would be great. Okay, because it's definitely called out on the next page. The one thing that I feel like is missing from this list is mental health issues.
And I just note, I would add after families and caregivers, if possible.
Communication with families and caregivers.
Families and
Right.
caregivers.
Oh, yep.
And then.
This is beautiful,
yeah.
this discussion, by the way, this is really helpful.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll add, I'm going to change on page 7, providing access and opportunity for all students to learn. Then I will add increasing communication with families and caregivers, and supports for mental health, for student mental health, for student, for,
Should we?
I guess
what
is the
should it
student
be
one.
Student
Yeah,
and
this is
employees?
student one. And then I might
Student one,
put the,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
so
put the
student.
Yeah, and then
Yes.
we could carry that forward
Yeah,
if you
we
want
can carry
to.
that forward.
Okay. Anything else in the significant student challenges? Yeah.
This might be really nitpicky, and it might just be that I've like read it too many times, so I'm getting confused. But I almost feel like it's like not student challenge makes it sound like the challenge is the student. Like I don't know if that's anyone else's.
Okay, how could we say that again?
Most
Student
significant
related,
student-
related to students, student.
Significant challenges related to students?
I don't know, because that like adds words and makes it more complicated. I just don't know if anyone else like read it like that.
Can you say it one more time, Dr. Hall?
What is the most significant student challenge the district faces? And then the second one is the most significant systemic
You know what?
challenge. Okay, very good.
Dr. Hall?
Yeah.
And I'm still going through this, and I know we have language in here, opportunity for all students to achieve and closing achievement gaps. But are we being explicit enough about the diversity within our school communities, and making sure that we're outlining that as something of importance? At least for me as an individual board member, just thinking out loud, going through this survey, but I know equity is a big element of our mission and our vision, and I'm wondering if we should be explicit about that in our outreach in this survey, somewhere, somehow.
Yes,
Well,
so,
it's there in other places.
Yeah.
Okay.
But on this, And that's, I guess that's a question.
Yeah.
Is diversity one of our greatest educational challenges?
I don't think I think it's our opportunity, but, there are challenges in closing the achievement gap and making sure that all students are achieving based on what kinds of resources we're allocating to where the needs are.
Do we want to say closing achievement gaps with our most
Marginalized
communities? I mean, do you want to
Student
be very
groups?
specific about?
Well, the first one, we're the first one, providing access and opportunity for all students. That's the one that's intended to get at that diversity angle. We toyed with that one in a number. We listed 4 different kinds of diversity, and then we thought, well, then what about the 3 that we've excluded? And so then we went back to just one, and then we said, you know what? Really, it's about access and opportunity for all kids. Right. And so that's how we're trying to get at that. I'm still hearing the echo of the, what does it mean to close an achievement gap? That's kind of a term of art. So I'm struggling with that a little bit myself.
And I'm not putting Dr. Bunde on the spot, but I know we've talked a lot about equity and equity work in the school district and equity frameworks that's been presented to this board. And Superintendent, if there is language from that work, if Dr. Bunde has suggestions, would we be able to incorporate that?
Absolutely. I'm seeing, each time I look at you, I'm seeing Lydia's hand waving behind her
I
head.
know. And before
It's a little distracting. Can we call on her?
Yes, but I just also want to point out that on page 2, where we talked about values and priorities, we did specifically call out understanding a diverse educational environment.
Okay.
And that's the question the superintendent was referencing, where we had culturally, ethically, or ethnically, economically, linguistically, how many different ways can we, list it out versus not list it out. And so if by making it smaller, it makes it feel less important, then that's a thing to think about. But that's really what we were looking at right there in terms of where is that as a value and priority of you in the Salt Lake City School District. So that's where I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't see the understanding a diverse educational environment. So I don't know if this still applies, but I guess my thought was that maybe under rate the importance of the following experiences of a superintendent candidate, maybe like you add a question there, like has worked with diverse groups, or like has worked in a diverse racially and like a diverse racial and
Experiences in urban school district, I think is what we asked, wasn't it?
I think so,
in our
yeah.
last one.
Yeah, I just don't want it to get lost.
Yep. Oh, definitely.
And maybe if the suggestion's open for providing equity, access, and opportunity for all students, or adding equity into that discussion. I know we're still working through our equity framework right now, but I just don't want it to get lost. And that's just my own opinion.
Right.
But
No,
if
I
the board
appreciate that.
isn't open to that, then I understand too. So.
Yeah.
Maybe we also flip to the next one and see that as something that could be listed systemically,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not.
Okay, but I have a problem with systemic. I mean, there are some people that, when they see words like that, they, Superintendent Bates, you just changed the previous one to educational. Why can't we change this to operational?
Operational, John.
I think that makes it
Sure.
more comfortable for some people.
I'm looking at the
And
question.
then when you go
More
down.
positive than negative.
Yeah, it is. And then when you look at operating with transparency, well, we've said operational, why can't you say functioning? So you did operational up in the top.
Oh, sure.
And then you did functioning with
The
transparency.
third one down rather than operating with,
Accountability.
functioning with.
Very good.
Good catch.
Thank you. All right. I will make those changes.
And then just to say, I don't know if this is a place you see that what you're missing could be added here
All right.
effectively.
I, just to clarify, I drew it on the page with, I had experience in working with diverse communities under rate the importance of the following experiences. So I can add it there. is there a way to phrase that in a positive way around, in a ranking of operational challenge? So I guess I would love, I love the suggestion to put it on the experience page. Do you have experience working with diverse communities? I very much hear your point about how focused do we make that so that we're not, it's possible to work in a very diverse community that isn't urban. And so if that is the focus of what we're looking at, then we could ask, is that important to our constituents? And so then we would have it under values and priorities and under experiences. So if I've added it in that place. Now we can talk about page 8.
Do you have a thought, Sandra? Just
When we were
you want to
talking
weigh in
about,
on this
like
debate?
a diverse community versus urban community versus.
Would you put it under operational challenges?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Diverse on.
Experiences of the superintendent.
Okay.
You put it there.
Okay.
Maybe one more thing on 8.
Thank you, Dr. Buendia.
Increasing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, our 5th one down, increasing community engagement and communication. So I think that that's, yeah.
Yes. Yep. Important. And now I'll turn to our last page, which is our open-ended. Is there anything else you would like the board to consider as they select the superintendent?
Right.
And this would be where they could, anything that they feel like we've missed, anything that's really important to them, and we would take those and just to repeat, that's the very time-consuming part of the process. But we would look at those, code those, and then give them back to you with major trends and some representative comments.
Okay, so when they get to that question, some people are overwhelmed and they're going, now I got to think about something and type this all in. If they don't do that, well, I'm just thinking about how
No,
they do it.
yes.
I'm that person.
True.
So if
They
they
can,
don't.
they can push go if they
okay,
felt like
yeah,
they have.
it's not going to invalidate the.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is such a, well, please.
I asked that same question, said, what if they get 3 pages in and quit there?
Yeah,
And she
I
said,
want
we'll,
it to be.
we'll
that
count
you're-
whatever they do.
Okay,
We'll count
great.
as
Yes.
much as they do.
Yep, we'll count everything they give us, and the only one that we would consider making a required one, and I would bring this to you as a question, is on page 10, and this would only go to people on the open community survey. So at this point, the survey itself is finished, and if it's the open link, then we would ask what the primary relationship to the district is. And that would be one that we'd like to know so that we can break that out for you and say, this is what officials thought, or this is what, and if we have a very small group, then we'll not, name the number. The 2 people that responded to this, one called senator and one called mayor. No, we would not do that. So we could ask them to explain what that relationship is. And then on page 11, they could indicate if they know it or would like to, their voting precinct. So I've got the precincts and your names listed there. And then a zip code, because, we can break up a lot of information in our district by zip code. And then also by age of people who are taking the open community survey.
Can we put a link in the what is your voting precinct so that they could find it?
A map?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I say yes, and I look at my teams to make sure I meant yes.
Now think for a moment, board members, so we could have in about 3 weeks pie charts and all kinds of information about how a whole lot of people in our community, and broken out by different groups if we choose, value these different things. And then what would we do with that information? Well, we'll use that information throughout February to develop the posting, the questions, things like that. Then March is then the posting and people apply. Then April is the evaluation of the applicants, which is the interviews and so on. So thinking about this information and what we really want to do with it, what you really want to do with it. And in that context, let's go back to the question that we deferred. Should we send this to elementary and middle school students as well, reworking it, or should we go with ninth grade on up? That's.
I have some feelings about that, and part of it is as an educator. I guess I am thinking 6th grade, those students, they want to have a voice, and middle school, they want to have a voice. I think that, and I mean, I've taught, and this is just me, I've taught 6th grade, I've taught 3rd grade, I've taught 2nd grade. 3rd and 2nd graders, they're still learning about what a voice is, okay? But a 6th grader, they have a voice, and it might be not quite what we think a voice is, but to them, it's really important. And to me, it's important. And these are individuals that they're directly impacted by who we choose. So I understand the whole discussion about, and I agree, like having teachers have to, you know, implement all of that. And I mean, we're putting such a quick turnaround time on this anyway. I don't know how you could logistically accomplish all of that. But isn't there a way that we could have this worded? Because I think that 6th graders who feel strongly, they'd be able, if we used language, they'd be able to say, you know what, I can do this survey, and I want to do this survey. And I think it's the same way for middle school children. We've said how in other discussions that 6th grade really is middle school anyway, so I just think it would be nice to include middle school.
If I could just...
Did you see Tiffany's face light up when you said
Yes.
6th grade really is
In the
middle
middle
school
school.
anyway? She has a feeling there.
What I would like to agree with you in terms of 6th grade really having a voice and beginning to understand their civic participation.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about.
And I will say on previous surveys that we've given, and again, the students who aren't interested don't participate, but as a student who chooses to click on this with or without teacher support or librarian support, because they could click on it, you know, on their laptop, you know, in the classroom at any point or in the library, they could not participate in questions and still move forward. And where we have seen students really provide that voice is they have something to say, and they may not understand achievement gap, and they may not understand diverse community or the importance of a doctorate versus a non-traditional preparation, but they will go to the comment box and they will put those comments in there, and we can pull those out and say, these are comments that have been given to us by students in 6th grade. I mean, we would be able to look at that. And that tends to be a place where we do hear that very authentic student voices in that comment box. And there's nothing that would keep them from getting to it if they chose not to engage with the previous questions.
Thank you. I just have had experience where I want those 6th graders to be engaged, because some students start checking out already. And
Absolutely.
I want them to feel like, okay, finally I got to, instead of being, well, this is how it is, I got somewhere an opportunity to express myself.
And if a student in 4th grade decided that they wanted to do the same thing, they could certainly scan a community link and put it in through the community as well. And that's why I have student on that demographic list at the bottom.
Board members. I think we
I
have board
think
members.
Lydia first, and then
Okay.
I go after Lydia.
Oh, I think I completely agree that there's like a lot of 6th grade students who'd be interested in providing feedback. I almost wonder if we send a link to middle schoolers and elementary schoolers that's just like slide 9, or like maybe like some of the other slides that are like the most relevant. So like even if we don't spend the time to like rework all the language, a student's not clicking through 9 slides to get to like the text box where they want to express their thoughts.
Right, 4 slides, yeah.
Oh,
We
yeah,
could
sorry,
do that.
4
I know, it looks like more on the paper, I promise, but there's not that many clicks, I promise.
Board Member
Yeah.
Smith.
So first, I still want to hear from Ashley and Jenny. There are 2 parents that are on the board. And I'm just going to voice some hesitation about sending it to schools. I am really uncomfortable with, because I can already know who's going to be calling me, that there are going to be parents who are not going to be happy about a survey being sent to them, to school, at an elementary age especially, without the supervision of the parent, because they want to be able to be engaged in that. And I understand what Brian was saying, you know, that there may be some parents that are okay with that, but there's also going to be a host of parents that are not going to be okay with you sending a survey, and even up to the high school. So I think that we just need to be really cautious when we go down this road of where this survey is going to be sent to. For me personally, first and foremost, I think it should be sent to the home. And then, you know, but again, that's just my own personal opinion. But I would like to hear, you know, from Ashley and Jenny, since they are 2 parents on the board right now.
Well, isn't there an opportunity to have the parent approval? Because they have sent out links and say, hey, we're having this, would you approve it?
There you go.
You know, something like that. I do find myself having to sit with my child to go over something like this. I can obviously relate to the busyness that a lot of my community members and constituents will be unable to provide, you know, that kind of support towards their children. But I think my kids are amazing, and I think that a lot of their input is very valuable to me. And you know, every day they share their activities that happen at school, and you know, they continue to bring a lot of great input, especially, you know, even my 5th grader. He's brilliant. And so, I don't know, I understand it. I understand why we wouldn't get their info, but I'm okay with that. You know, if there is very pertinent information that we want from this elementary kid, just simply just do that for that age group. If we could simplify a lot of things for that age group, I think it's doable.
Good point.
I think it's really reasonable to see that this is a snapshot and we can survey more kids later in different relevant ways. Because, you know, the big thing is it's a time to educate students on like what is a superintendent and what do they do, right? And more than what would you like to see in a superintendent? Does that make sense? So I think that seeing this as the immediate snapshot we need to move forward in a process, there's a lot longer of a process to be had, and we can fold in more meaningful ways for kids' voices to be included in that as we go on. And I don't, as a parent, share the concerns about opting in that Christy's raising, but I know many do. So why fall into that trap when we can move forward with good content we have, taking potentially Lydia's suggestion of having a smaller thing we do immediately, but moving forward with what we know will give us good information, which is middle school and up, and maybe that means 6th grade as well, right, as we're navigating that potential discussion. So I would say move forward in whatever way makes the most sense with the feedback given, and do avoid that, what Christy's bringing up about parent concerns.
I have a suggestion there. Would this be possible, Tiffany, to include to tailor the parent email specifically, and to include there a link if you'd like your child to take a similar survey, please click this link from your email.
I believe so. I'm going to go with probably. And
Sam's
well,
trying to say something.
yeah, because the problem is it links to the email address, and so.
Well,
can
if we
link
don't,
to the email
we're-
address
so
in
we-
the email?
We're just going to pull the Guardian email out of PowerSchool
Right.
anyway, so we'll be able to tie it
Just
back.
tie it back in there.
I like that.
And then the Guardian
answer is yes.
email would be tailored to guardians, such that, okay, thank you for taking this. Now, if you'd like your student to take a similar survey, click here. That takes care
There
of
are both of those
that
problems.
piece. of the
Vice President, sorry to interrupt.
No,
you.
no, no.
I kind of have a question, just steering a little bit away. We've had a lot of conversation tonight about access of the survey. I'm wondering, and I stepped out for a moment, so this may have already been covered, but do we have the capabilities of administering the survey in different languages?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Member
Thank you. I
Jensen.
should have said that immediately.
Well, I want to clarify myself. I wasn't thinking that we were going to be, doing this in school.
Oh,
What
yeah.
I
Of
was
course not.
saying was that I just thought it would be good to make that accessible to sixth graders. And if we're going to do it through, like, the parent email, and, I mean, that's great. I just wanted it to be that we recognize that they do have a voice.
Right.
And
Well,
I
yeah.
wasn't saying, okay, now we're going to have the schools do it. I thought that's what I had explained, that logistically, I don't think we can
No,
do that.
that's how I heard you as well.
Yeah, okay.
And we could put it in the email. We could still also push it out to the student folders of sixth and up. And so if they wanted to access it there, they could. So we still have some options to make sure that we can include all of our students in this.
But going through that parent approval, yeah, okay.
Would it also be possible, I know there's some concerns about parental consent, but would it be possible to email it to students and to post it in Canvas for students? So it's like more places.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So,
What's the importance of, I'm just asking, the importance of knowing how old the person is that fills out the survey?
Good question.
this is open to you.
Yeah, I mean,
If you don't
if-
find it important, then we do not need to include that.
I'm just asking. I throw it out to all of you.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just break down who are you, right? As a student, you could have subsets of students, if that would help.
Yes, well, on the community survey, you mean. So I believe that we were thinking with the age survey, if we didn't know anything else about them, then it might be, there might be a big difference in a taxpayer-only, no student who is 25, and a taxpayer-only, no student who is 60. And so, and it could be, as the superintendent said, how will you use this in the time frame that we have? Maybe that's too much of a granular level, and we would never use that information. If you don't ask the question, then you don't have the information. It is an optional question. So, they may not choose to answer.
Oh, that's true. They don't have to.
Yeah, it is
No,
optional.
they do not. The only one that we're asking them to answer is what their relationship to the district is.
That totally makes
And then
sense.
zip code, precinct, and age are all optional,
Got it.
so that if we wanted to parse down to that level, we would have that data.
Tiffany, can you bounce us over to the timeline
Yeah.
quick?
Can we go back to the PowerPoint real quick? So looking at this, I feel like the changes that you have indicated that I've written down and reviewed with you are such that we would be able to deploy with your consent by Friday, January 20th. Then we could leave that survey open from the 20th till the 31st, and then close it for analysis. That would enable us to pull all the data in, get those rankings, ratings, percentages of agree, neutral, disagree, and then also look at those open comments and be able to pull out the focus areas and choose those comments that represent the voice of the written work during February 1st through 6th, and we would be able to report back to you in an open meeting after that point at your discretion. So if this is a plan and it's something you'd like us to move forward with to provide this information to you, we are set and ready to go.
Seeing good head nods, and
Okay.
thank you for the discussion.
Very good.
And
Thank
for
you.
hearing all of our suggestions as well.
Then we
All
will
right.
get it ready for you. Thank you.
Up next on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Okay, up next is board member report. Are there any board member reports that folks would like to give tonight?
I have one fast congratulations that West High had, I think, 9 entries accepted into the Springfield Museum of Art high school show. So that was very
Cool.
exciting.
Thanks for sharing that.
That's really cool.
Anything else from other board members? Lydia? Okay. I don't have anything. Board member Jensen.
Well, as I have been visiting the elementary schools and one of the middle schools in my district, it's been exciting for me to see the focus on science fairs. And I think that that's a really valuable opportunity for our students. And thank you for telling the superintendent, thank you for providing that. And the schools that I've met with, they're excited with what you're doing there.
Brian is not saying that Indian Hills has like 250 entries in their science fair.
Yeah, it's
right now.
really exciting.
So-
I mean, I guess I should
And that's
be
saying something,
bragging.
because they only got
Yeah.
138
I mean,
kids.
major brag. That's like basically 100% participation
Yeah,
at Indian
it's,
Hills.
it's really exciting.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Seeing no other board member reports, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.